Hi, I'm Rain. In this video, I'm going to be making a pair of Black Ops 2 Tomahawks, and I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. So to start, I found this model on Thingiverse. The link's in the description if you want to find it yourself. Then I added the file to Cura after splitting it in half, and added a raft as well. I then set it to print at 190C on the nozzle, 40C on the build plate, and I printed out of white PLA. Now, to get this print to print properly, I used a raft, and I also printed a lot slower, especially on the first few layers. I went in manually in the Cura settings and changed that, and that seemed to work quite well. I also found that I had to be very conscious of the temperature in the print space in the room, otherwise it would end up curling and not printing correctly. Now I'm just removing the support material and generally cleaning up the model, just getting it ready to work with. Now I'm sanding the primary joint, making sure both halves are level. I've added some binder clips to the edges of these models and keeping that there for about 24 hours. This is just to reduce the effects of curling or warping whilst printing. As I said, I did manage to get the model to print fine, but not quite level, so this just helps correct that. Now I'm using a file and some sanding paper to scuff up the edges of this first joint. I chose to do this one first as it will allow me to line up both halves easier later on, and I'm using a bit of masking tape. This will help line up these two pieces and also protect my work surface. To stick these two parts together, I'm using a small amount of super glue, and then I'm going to add a line of super glue across the top once it's dry. Now that's fully cured, I'm using another line of super glue to stick these two halves together, making sure that I line them up perfectly and creating a secure connection between all four pieces. Again, I'm adding the binder clips just to add a bit more pressure and keep everything secure whilst the glue dries. Once that was done, I added a line of glue around the entire edge of the Tomahawk. This adds strength and starts filling in the gap created by the seam. Now this definitely created a stronger bond, and I would do this again, but it did not fill in the gaps how I wanted, so I've got something else I'm going to use instead. Before I do that, I'm just going to use some tissue paper to fill in some of the larger gaps between some of the edges on the Tomahawk, such as the top. There was quite a wide gap, so I'm pushing in some tissue paper, trimming the edges and gluing it in place. This creates a nice sort of foundation to create a good surface from on the top. Next, I'm giving the whole Tomahawk a sand whilst focusing on the seams and getting a smooth finish as possible. This is to remove the overspill of the super glue and clean up the tissue paper and make the surface ready for paint. My first idea was to fill in the seams with paint, so I'm applying a thick coat of black paint. This helped smooth out some of the layer lines but didn't quite help with the seam. I've got another idea of a possible fix, but I've not tried it before, so it'll be a bit of an experiment and it'll be interesting to see if it works. So to finally fill in the seam once and for all, I'm going to be giving this Mod Podge Dimensional Magic a go. I've used this before on some pins I made a while ago, so I had it lying around. It wasn't really designed for this kind of use, but I thought I'd give it a go, see what it works out like. And I actually found that it worked perfectly, because I was able to fill in the seam as the glue was very three-dimensional and really does what it says on the tin, funnily enough. And then afterwards I went in with an X-Acto knife and just scraped off the overlap, and this worked out really well. I will say though that one of them I left dry overnight and the glue was very tough afterwards, so I'd recommend scraping off the overlap after an hour or two. Any longer than that and it's going to be difficult. It did work, but it would be considerably more difficult. So yeah, an hour or so afterwards, after it's dried, perfect time. After that I sanded down the entire piece, initially starting off with about 150 grit sandpaper. This is to smooth out all the paint from before and also scuff up the edges so that we can apply new paint now. To really achieve a great final finish and a smooth, clean look, I'm using 600 grit sandpaper and then moving up to 1000 grit sandpaper after that. Now this worked out great and really prepped the surface well. Before adding the first layer of paint, I'm giving the Tomahawk a wipe down with tissue and also a wet wipe. This gets rid of all the particles from sanding and any paint particles still left on the model. Now a coat of matte black spray paint just to make the entire Tomahawk a flat colour, and this gives us a really good base to work on top of. Here I'm coating the Tomahawks in a clear coat of gloss spray paint. Now I actually made a mistake and used glossy spray paint instead of matte spray paint here, and I really regret that decision. It was a nightmare to sort out, took ages to dry, and I should have just used matte spray paint. But it didn't end up affecting the model too harshly. It just cost a load of time to dry it and then I had to paint on top of it, so it worked out fine. But note to self, use matte spray paint. Now I'm masking off all the areas I want to stay black whilst leaving open all the areas I want to be silver. I'm using a metallic silver spray paint and I find this works best when it's placed on top of black. So that's why we coated the entire model black in the first place. Now it's dry, I'm just taking off all the masking tape. I'm just going in with a brush now to clean up any inaccuracies or mistakes that I made when masking. To get the exact colour silver, I spray the silver paint into a cup and then use that as the paint I use on my brush. Now to weather this Tomahawk, I'm going to be using a technique called dry brushing. This is where you remove most of the paint from the paintbrush and then add just spots to the highlights, and it creates a really nice weather effect. This works well because it looks like the black paint has been worn off the metal rather than the other way around, rather than adding the silver paint, which is nice. I'm also going to be adding a bit more texture by creating a few splotches and scratches along the surface of the Tomahawk. This is because I want the Tomahawk to be heavily weathered and well aged. Now to add a bit more age to the Tomahawk, I'm adding a black wash. A black wash is basically watered down black paint. I'm using this to add the illusion of grit and dirt and oil that's gotten into the grooves and the crevices of the Tomahawk. This will add realism and make your prop look a lot older and dirtier. It also helps by dulling some of the shine of the silver, adding to the realistic metal look we're aiming for. I'm adding extra black paint into certain areas that I think would get the dirtiest. and I also add a few silver highlights to the tops of the screws and the rivets to complete the overall look. Now, finally, using the correct spray paint, clear matte finish spray paint, we can finally seal this model, and then we'll have the final piece. These two Tomahawks took way longer than I expected to complete, but I am so happy that I did, because these came out fantastically. They look real, they look gritty, they look dirty, they look old, they look shiny, they look like they were in Black Ops 2, which I am very happy with. And I am very pleased they came out like this. If you like this video and you like what I do on this channel, be sure to subscribe and leave a like. It really does help me out. And why not leave a suggestion for what you want me to make next? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on another video.